there are two things that will ruin your life. And if you don't get these two things handled, it will ruin your attraction, your intimacy, your sex life. It will also, and this is the worst one, ruin respect. This will not also just affect your intimate relationships, but also relationships with family, children, and also at workplace. So what is these two things? When you fix these two things, you will see a massive improvement in the quality of your life and you'll feel much more empowered. Those two things are guilt and shame. We need guilt and shame. The problem is with most nice guys, with guys got an emotional fracture, what happens is that as childhood, maybe you didn't have the attention, maybe you didn't have the connection, maybe you didn't get the guidance in life. And this was definitely true for me as well, because there was a lot of guilt and shame that, say, my mother wasn't feeling well and I just wanted to fix her life and sort things out, make things better for her. That kind of neglect, I just spend a lot of time making sure that people weren't upset with me, annoyed with me, sad with me, or angry at me. So these kind of things are programming in my childhood, not just in my childhood, but also programming in my DNA. So these are software that exist for a long time in us and have been evolving and developing. As a result, what happens is that we tend to have a high level of guilt and shame. These nice guys have a high level of guilt and shame. And for example, you want to break up in a relationship, but you feel so guilty. I'm like, oh, I don't want to break up with her because if I do, she will be heartbroken. She will be a mess. And it was because of me. I remember my first relationship, which was terrible. And I was with somebody who was very possessive and she had a lot of emotional issues. I mean, I had my emotional issues too, but in this scenario, it was a very much of a toxic relationship because she had a lot of abandonment issues and she had also some personality disorders. But I want to focus on how I showed up. And the way I showed up was I really wanted to break up with her. But instead of breaking up, it became I was coward. I put my hand up. I was very cowardly here. And I allowed her to manipulate me, push me around, do things that I didn't want to do. So spend time when I wanted to spend more time with myself, my hobbies. I was really into cars and I wanted to go to car shows, but she'd get really upset. I even wanted to hang out with my friends and she'd be like, why are you hanging out with your friends? Why didn't you want to hang out with me? Even though I spent the whole weekend with her, she's like, well, no, you should be spending more time with me. So there was a lot of guilt trips constantly making me feel guilty of not doing enough. I was never enough for her. So no matter what I did, it was never enough. So this constant guilt tripping made me feel really shit about myself. So I started to, wanted to please her. I didn't want to upset her. So I wanted to please her. So I just kept on forgoing my plans, putting my needs away just to make sure that she was happy. And when she wasn't happy, she'd be real down. She'll be real passive aggressive. She'll be really cold. And that's the worst thing I hated was anytime she was cold and unresponsive, it just agitate my nervous system. I was so uncomfortable. We were watching a movie together and she'd just be, what do you want? No. And really cold. And that, I couldn't sit with that. So then I just ran around after her, just trying to make her happy, trying to make her laugh, just trying to get her to change the mood. I couldn't sit with the mood because the guilt inside was eroding inside of me. And this is the guilt that stopped me wanting to live my life on my terms as well. So things that I wanted to do, but I instead it gave into guilt and guilt trips. And that just ruined the quality of life. She also wanted a man who would stand up for himself. I didn't stand up for myself because I was afraid of her emotions being down. I wanted her emotions to be okay. And I've seen a lot of guys who do this. What we do is we kind of they hijack our emotions. So we ignore ours. We just get over responsible, over caring for their emotions. And this is a recipe for disaster and a really unhappy, unsatisfying life. Not just for yourself, but also for others. I remember my friends and family used to say, Faisal, why are you not coming out? Why are you not doing this? And I was like, well, she's feeling down or she's upset and I want to be there for her. what I was doing was allowing her to have her own life, to deal with her situation. Instead, I took on the ownership of trying to fix her, rescue her, because there was a lot of guilt and shame. Oh, I'm a bad person if I, don't spend time with her. Oh, I'm a bad person that I want to see my friends. I want to be happy, but she's feeling sad. So I felt guilty of wanting to enjoy myself, be happy when somebody else is sad. So these are all very deep, meshed, interlinked emotions that come from something called mother-son enmeshment. So when you've had in your childhood, maybe, or even in your evolution of DNA, your mother or somebody around you, your caregivers, they've been very upset, they haven't been happy, and you're trying to make them happy, and you failed. So what I was doing was, because I failed as in my childhood, I'm using somebody else through proxy. I'm trying to make them happy, trying to compensate for the fact that I made them. I wasn't able to help, say, my mother be happy, and when she was down, when she was upset. So this is more of a going deeper into mother-son enmeshment. But the real important message I want to get to you or give you is learning that when you're being pushed around guilt and shame, you will not escalate with women. You will not make moves with women because you're thinking, well, I don't want her to be upset. I don't want to be guilty. I don't want to come across like a jerk or an asshole. But even though you're doing something that isn't an asshole or being a jerk. Of course, I mean, if you're forcing yourself onto somebody, that is an asshole thing to do. You don't do that fucking shit. But if you're just trying to express your emotions, trying to express your even your opinion, I mean, you'll see a lot of guys who change their opinion so it doesn't upset anybody. Why? Because I feel guilty that she's experiencing this. And another way that this guilt and shame comes up is wanting to break up. I didn't want to break up with her because I would see her going into a complete mess. And if she's going to mess, and it's my responsibility. What made it terrible, what made it really worse for me, where I felt really trapped, was the fact that when I wanted to break up, she said, if you break up, I'll commit suicide and it'll be your fault. Imagine hearing those words when you're like 20 years old, 21 years old, when you're young, you're impressionable, you haven't understood life, and you're just developing into, growing into adulthood. Even at 2021, guys are still very immature. And then hearing those words it was shocking. It was heartbreaking. It was like I just felt completely trapped and responsible. And that guilt and shame then made me want to do things I didn't want to. Things like I ended up getting engaged to her because I thought, well, if I get engaged to you, it'll make you happy. And that situation of you being sad and upset won't exist anymore. Unfortunately, obviously, I couldn't foresee the future, or I couldn't analyze her personality. So things were better for a few months. I was thinking, okay, cool, this is great. I got this fixed. I sorted it out. I fixed all those situations. But eventually it went back to her baseline. Her baseline was very miserable, upset, negative. And again, in turn, that made me, and it started to fracture me inside. And all because of two things, the guilt and shame. Guilt is I'm doing something bad, I'm doing something wrong. And then shame is I'm bad, I'm not a good person. And when guys go into a shame spiral or a guilt spiral, then they just go into this overthinking way of like, I'm a really bad person. And it starts to ruin relationships. It ruins your quality of life. It takes away all your freedom. It takes away all your power. So how do we work on this? What are the things that you can do? The things I started to work on was first understanding and separating myself from this guilt and shame. So realizing that actually her emotions are her emotions. I mean, cognitively, they're so easy to do. I mean, cognitively, we know many things to do, but we're not worked by this part of the brain where emotional brain kicks in. I have clients who know so much about personal growth, personal development. There's so much content on YouTube, but that's all they are, is they're just very knowledgeable people, but they don't embody it. They're not always moving that way. That's like somebody saying, well, I know all the things to do in the gym, but doesn't have that body or doesn't have the result. Why? Because the action comes from a different part of us. And that's the most difficult thing to do, is taking those actions of enmeshment work. This is deep psychological work that has to be done with a professional. So I suggest, working on this with a coach, a therapist, a psychologist who understands this, has gone through it and overcome this. This is something my coaches helped me to overcome as well. Hyper codependency, mother-son enmeshment, because I wasn't independent. I wasn't my own self. I was regulated. My emotions were regulated by her or any woman that I get into a relationship with. And then my opinions, everything, I run around according to their emotions and their thinking and their opinion. That is something that we have to work on, is to separate yourself and then individualize. So this is something I call healing your emotional fracture. So the emotional fracture is the one when you're fractured, you become needy, you become codependent, you become hypervigilant, you're afraid to be abandoned, and anything that can hurt you on that way, you're super jealous, you're super conscious about not upsetting that person. So that's an emotional fracture. And we start to fix this emotional fracture by separating ourselves. So we start to differentiate. That means I will then start building my own core, my worth, my own identity, my opinions, and having my own reality. And because when you're enmeshed, when you have this bind, and again, I don't expect 95% of men to understand what I'm saying here, but this will land with maybe 5% of the guys who are ready to take on this message. So if this message is like, fuck you, Faisal, what are you talking about, mother-son enmeshment? That's exactly what is said in the book. There's a book called Married to Mom by Dr. Kenneth Davies. And he says that anyone who tries to break this bind, the guys will have an adverse reaction to it. I remember I had a client, when I told him about mother-son enmeshment work, I said, we can be working on this. And I gave him the book. He was in tears and he was cursing me. He goes, fuck you, Faisal. He was really upset. And I said to him, look, just sit with it. After 6 months, he sat with it for 6 months. He was so upset. He said, you're right. You know what? I feel guilty. I take on people's emotions. I'm not regulated by myself. I'm regulated by other people. I care too much about what other people think. I want to break free from that. How do I do this? I said, okay, great. You can start healing your emotional fracture. There's a few things I do with the guys in my private coaching practice. Those things start to help the guys separate. If you don't have access to my coaching or don't have access to other therapists or coaches, one of the things you can start doing is building your own world, like identifying your world, your values, and then really sticking to them no matter what. If that thing is important to you, you have what I call non-negotiables in your life. You gotta have non-negotiables. Now you can do this with having non-negotiable habits. And this is something I really work on with my private group. I have a private group called the Masculine Charisma Squad Group, which is just a handful of guys in my private WhatsApp. So we're constantly in connection and we're constantly auditing our habits. So we're building a strong masculine foundation. When you don't have a strong masculine foundation, it's like quicksand. You can just be sunk into anybody else's reality or their frame or frame control, as we call it, or is called on the internet. So start building that foundation. When you start building that foundation, you'll start separating your emotions from anybody else's emotions. And guys, you might think, no, I'm not like that. Maybe true. Now, if that's you, then you probably, I don't know why you'd be watching this video, but even the most powerful men, right? I know guys who've been in the army. I know guys who have been CEOs, like really top tier in their field. But as soon as it comes to women and relationships, it's a different story. They become like pussycats, like really soft men, like child. They become like parent-child. They become the child. And they're like, what does mommy want? I don't want to upset mommy. This is what's going on. These are real mommy issues. And, it's nothing. I mean, you might feel shame. You might feel embarrassed about it. It's like, hey, I can go to war. I can go and run a big company with thousands of people. But when it comes to my woman at home, I'm like a weakling. I have no balls. And this is natural. Many men struggle with this. There's always going to be some woman in your life who will have a strong, dominant power. And when you have a weak foundation, she's going to rule you. And when she starts ruling you, she will then start to disrespect you. She's like, a guy cannot handle himself. He's not strong. He doesn't have his own core world. And he's taken on my world. She'll just feel suffocated and then lose attraction for you. So then you'll get the dead bedroom, start to have an affair. She might even start to, monkey jump, which is like going to another relationship. So there's a lot of things that can happen. So I wish I was taught this when I was early on in my life. I wish I had some access to psychology. I wish I had access to life coaches and mentors and teachers. I mean, if you're in your 20s and your 30s, and I love working with guys in their late 20s and 30s because they're hungry and they are like, I want to make sure that I can do everything I can for a, not perfect future or relationships, but I can work on mitigating like the bad habits, the bad kind of like mistakes, the irresponsible mistakes that we can make. As I say, the fool kind of learns from his mistakes, but the wise learn from other people's mistakes. And that's what you're going to be doing. That's the thing with coaching, mentoring, is that you are learning to overcome some of the hurdles and challenges and the mistakes that a lot of people make. That's what successful people do. So when you can turn that success from your work into your private life, it starts to really improve the quality of life. And again, I'm not here saying you're going to have the most wonderful relationships, but what I am kind of like guaranteeing is if you work on some really good principles, core principles, you're going to live a good life. And a life worth protecting, worth enjoying, an exciting life, also a very peaceful, grounded, and a life that you'll look back and you go, I'm really glad I've worked on this guilt and shame. I worked on the core aspect of me. Guys, thank you so much for listening. And again, you want to become a man that you're proud of and do things more you're proud of. You don't have to do them 100% of the times, but just step by step, you'll start making changes and building a strong foundation. All right, I'm Faisal, and see you in the next call.